What if Disney had built Dragon Tower or this villain's attraction? How would the parks have been different? Today we're discussing the top unbuilt Disney attractions.
This is something that would have changed the entire landscape of that park.
We have to be getting this now, right?
Yeah,
This has to be part of this. They have the idea already planned out.
It would have dominated the skyline behind Cinderella Castle. Once you got back there, that would have been what every eye was drawn towards.
Welcome to the Enchanted Ears podcast.
Where we discuss anything and everything Disney.
I'm Angela.
And I'm Joe, and on today's episode, we are counting down the top 5 unbuilt Disney attractions with the help of Disney author historian Chris Smith.
Yes, I'm so excited about this. This was a really good one, and I think that there have been so many great ideas over time that have been shelved. And as we kind of talk about a little bit in the interview, things that get shelved, there's always hope that they can come back and like show up in different ways. So some of these we have seen, and some of these things maybe we'll get a chance to see.
Well, and that's the other kind of piece we talk about with a lot of these is like, what if Disney had built these attractions?
Mm-hmm.
Like, how would the parks have been different if, Beastly Kingdom moved forward? If, some of the attractions, there's a couple at Hollywood Studios. Like, how would the parks have been completely different today if they had built some of these older ones?
Well, it becomes like an instance of that, this or that. Like, you think you want this, but if you want this, then you probably wouldn't get that. So yeah, like the repercussions of some of these things either getting built or not getting built, which is like that part I think is so interesting to me, because it's like the what ifs of if things had gone differently, if there had been a different route taken.
That's almost as fascinating as the attractions themselves.
Yeah.
I'm just thinking through like what would have happened.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
Before we get into the interview though, let's cover some Disney news of the week. So Disneyland is celebrating its 70th anniversary. The Walt Disney animatronic is finally opened. So that new attraction at where Abraham Lincoln was, Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln, it's sharing that space. So we got our first look at the Walt Disney animatronic. I think the video that Disney itself put out, I think was interesting because it was a very short clip. I don't think it really was the best clip of the animatronic. And I think, whether it looks like him, I don't think it looks like him as much as I thought it would. But I will say, all the footage is very close up. When you're in the theater, it's going to be a little bit further away. So I'm going to hold full judgment until I see the actual show. But just based on what Disney put out, it looks like they could have maybe done a little bit better job.
It's interesting because I feel like overall Disney marketing has been off lately. And like this has been shown, and it's not the same, I'm sure, marketing department all around, but like this particular one, whenever you look through the comments, I can't remember, like some of the funny comments were like, no, this isn't Walt Disney, this is Bolt Hisney.
Well, a lot of people said like it looks like Tom Hanks as Walt Disney.
It's like there were tons of really funny comments about that like, and it is true. Like, I think there's something about his eyes that are off. I went through some photos. His smile, Walt smiled with his mouth open, which you can't really do on an animatronic. Even the one man who has a pretty famous like Instagram account and he cosplays Walt Disney. I was watching like his 70th account, his 70th anniversary like post, and he smiles with his mouth open like Walt Disney. So there's certain things about it that like don't quite ring true, but I do think that probably like from further away it might look a little better, different angles it might look a little better. And so it's just like there was a marketing miss a little bit on this, just like with Elio. Like Elio's a great movie, but it wasn't marketed well.
Yeah, I mean, I think even like the motion of the animatronic is much better. Like I've seen video of the show of fans being there where they're showing more of the motion and how fluid and lifelike it is from that perspective. And that's why I think like it's interesting that the Disney official kind of video on it didn't show any of that. It showed like a 2-second clip of him being very static. So you were very focused on how he looks compared to Walt versus, again, experiencing and seeing the whole thing with all the motion and everything. So I think, again, see the whole show. It's good, but it's just enough off that you're like, it just doesn't look quite right. And you do kind of wonder, like, is this part of the reason why the show was delayed a little bit? Like, were they trying to get it closer? Not sure, but still excited to see the show. I think it'll be a good addition to Disneyland. So still excited to see that overall.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it's just really cool. And again, that the way that they are building these animatronics nowadays, I wish that the clip had shown a little bit of more of that fluidity, because I think I've seen some of the longer clips and he moves really beautifully. So yeah, I'm looking forward to see it.
Yeah. And then over at Walt Disney World, they announced the dates for the holiday after hours events. So Jollywood Nights is coming back to Hollywood Studios. Mickey's Very Merry Christmas Party is coming back to Magic Kingdom. Those are going to be select nights in November and December. Starting pretty early too, like the 7th and 8th. The nice thing is they are not on the same day, so you can kind of go for a trip and experience both of them. Jollywood Nights, one of the new things is you're going to be able to get in the parks at 5:30. The actual party doesn't start until 7:30, but you have a couple extra hours, and that runs until 12:30. They talked a lot about like what's new for Jollywood Nights. It seems like Mickey's Very Merry Christmas Party is pretty much the same as it's always been. Not a lot of new stuff. But over at Jollywood Nights, they did mention the new Little Mermaid show, Disney Villains Unfairly Ever After, will be playing as part of the party, which is nice. Backlot Express is getting a new specialty menu. There's going to be new Jollywood Nights merch. They kind of tease a Spirit jersey over there. So
girl.
It sounds pretty exciting. We're planning to go down for the
Yes.
holidays to experience both of these.
I think you
So
Yeah.
pretty exciting though.
Yeah, I'm really excited because we have done Mickey's Very Merry before, but we've never Jollywood Nights is
It's relatively new.
Yeah, I was gonna say, how
think-
many years
I
has it
think
been going,
Last year
maybe?
might have been the first year.
yeah, so we've never done that one, but actually I've heard kind of like good things about that. Like it's I feel like I've heard that kind of Very Merry is more kind of toward like kids, although I mean,
well,
so is Disney Parks.
yeah, I mean,
but I enjoy
Jollywood
that.
Nights has Nightmare Before Christmas sing along. It has ice skating. It has a lot of characters. It has
It has ice skating.
yeah. There's like not you can't ice skate, but there's like an ice
was
skating
like,
show.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, they have the that kind of like 1930s like jazz lounge, the Tip Top Lounge. So there's just a lot more going on there.
I wonder if it's real ice or if it's that stuff that's like ice that flooring, you know what I'm talking about, that they can put down. Anyway, yeah,
I imagine it would be that being in Florida. I don't know if they could keep actual ice, but I'm not sure.
yeah, really cool. Anyway, I am so stoked about getting a chance to go and check it out, and I'm sure we'll give a full review about this. Very exciting.
Yeah, so really exciting. So if you are staying on property during November, December, tickets went on sale last Wednesday. For the general public, they go on sale this Wednesday if you're looking to go. So, all right, so let's get into our interview. So Christopher Smith, he's a lawyer by day. I kind of feel like it's like a superhero.
It's like Batman.
Yeah, it's like lawyer by day, Disney historian, and author by night. He's written 6 books on Disney, including The Disney World That Never Was and A Magical Half Century. Like we mentioned today, he is joining us to count down his top 5 favorite unbuilt attractions, and we get into a lot of like we said, like what the parks would have been like if they had been built. So really excited for everybody to hear this. Chris, welcome back to the show.
Yes, thank you for having me. It's been too long since we've talked, but I'm excited to be back on with you.
It has been quite a long time. I actually went back and looked. We talked to you. It was episode 133. It was December of 2020. So we're coming up on almost 5 years.
Yeah, hopefully we can set a track record for getting back together sooner than every 5 years.
Every 5 years, exactly.
You haven't aged a day, Chris.
Oh, listen, it's amazing what new video can do these days. So I appreciate
Well, Chris, we are very excited to have you back on because you are a Disney historian, and you are going to talk today about your top 5 unbuilt Disney attractions. And some of these, kind of briefly, Angela and I were briefly kind of looking them up. Didn't want to spoil too much, though. But some of them are just absolutely incredible. And we were kind of talking beforehand, like Disney has to build some of these. So really, really excited to get into this list here. And kind of hear the history of these attractions, why they weren't built, and why hopefully maybe they'll build them in the future. So,
Yeah, it's funny because a lot of people, when you start talking about things that weren't built, they think, well, it must have not been a great idea if they didn't build it, when really the truth is the exact opposite, right? They were just so incredible, so amazing, came with a big price tag. A lot of times that's the reason they weren't built, but still outstanding to kind of dream and think of if these attractions would have come into the parks.
Yeah, definitely. All right, well let's get into it. If you want to start with your number 5 pick here.
Sure. And so kind of a recurring theme of this list is I'm cheating. Okay. So,
Okay.
coming up with a top five is tough. So I try to cram a couple into each of these entries. But so at number five, I'm going to go with the attractions that were proposed for the Roger Rabbit's Hollywood expansion to Disney's Hollywood Studios. And
Mhm.
really, when I think about these ideas, a lot of them were really close to have being made. I really feel strongly this one should have been made. It was just a perfect thematic tie in with the studios. And so, really, the story starts with the opening of Disney's MGM Studios in 1989. And so, we know from history and the documents that Disney contemplated the park to be just a half day park when it opened, right? Because at that time, a huge component of that park was the working studio, right? Where they were making films and television series. And so you only had a handful of attractions open there on opening day that tied in with the working studio. And so Disney thought, okay, families will come for a half a day before they jump over to Magic Kingdom or Epcot, and it'll be great. Well, the overwhelming success of the park from the very beginning shocked Disney. So, really, from the moment they opened the doors, they were thinking, we've got to add more capacity. And if you look in the 1989 shareholder report, it quotes Michael Eisner as saying they were going to try to double the park's capacity within the next few years, right? Which is just kind of an amazing statement in of itself. And so they started dreaming up these different expansion plans. And we're actually going to talk about two of these. We'll hit another one later on. But Roger Rabbit's Hollywood was one of those ideas. And when I talk to people now, they kind of laugh at that idea, thinking, wait a minute, how in the world would you do even a single attraction based on Roger Rabbit, much less an entire land? But if we go back to the late 1980s, Who Framed Roger Rabbit was just an overwhelmingly successful film. It came out in 1988, was the second highest grossing film of the year behind Rain Man with Tom Cruise and
Oh,
Dustin Hoffman. It
wow, it's in good company
outgrossed
there.
like Die Hard and Coming to America. I mean, it was a blockbuster success. Made
Wow.
tons.
Wow.
Yeah, and it was an interesting partnership at that time. That's a few years after Michael Eisner had come on board. And let's be honest, Disney feature films and especially Disney animation was at a very low point at that time. And so, based on Eisner's relationship with Steven Spielberg, they brokered this deal to make a film jointly with his company, Amblin Entertainment. And it was the first film since Mary Poppins in 1954 to feature animated characters that went on to win multiple Academy Awards. I mean, just an incredible success. I suggest anyone go back and watch that film because it still holds up. It's still funny. And again, based on this crazy, zany character, Roger Rabbit, this white rabbit with red hair, red overalls, blue eyes, just a very distinct character and set perfectly in the time period of 1940s Hollywood, right? The exact same time period that the studios as a whole were meant to represent, right? So just think about that perfect thematic tie. And again, like this was not just one attraction, it was three, right? A part of an entire land. You had Baby Herman's Runaway Baby Buggy Ride. And it just rolls off the tongue, right? I mean, just
Yeah.
perfect name. Um,
This one sounds pretty incredible. Where I think the concept was like Baby Herman didn't want to do one of the stunts, and so basically you're kind of thrown into it in this baby buggy, kind of flying, down the road or whatever.
that's it. That's it. And so
Yeah.
Baby Herman, right? Just one of my favorite characters, right? This literal baby in diapers that on screen looks cute and adorable, but as soon as the camera stops rolling, he's this foul mouthed, cigar smoking, womanizing man, right? And just a great character. And so the kind of the backdrop for that attraction, it was going to be a dark ride, kind of as Disney has done many times successfully. You're at these studios, the fictional Maroon Studios from the Who Framed Roger Rabbit film, and you pass by Baby Herman's, trailer, and you hear him in an argument with the director. The director wants him to do a dangerous scene, and Baby Herman's letting him have it. He's refusing to do it. So the desperate director pulls in us as guests to fill in for Baby Herman, right? Which again is just great. The ride vehicles are baby buggies, right? And so you're traveling through the Toontown Hospital, and just like the film, crazy hijinks, shenanigans. I make the comparison to what this ride would have been to Mr. Toad's Wild Ride, in that it was not your traditional, just nice, easy, dark ride, and just happy and smiles. It wasn't a thrill attraction, but just like the film itself, it's going to be a little grittier, a little more fun, zooming through those different scenes. And I think would have been just a very unique attraction that would have been fantastic, right? Going on this adventure, this madcap adventure through the hospital. A couple of other smaller attractions, a Toontown trolley ride, which that idea morphed a little bit. If you remember the film, the old red cars, right, from California played a big role in that film. And so this Toontown trolley would have been both a transportation device, but also a motion simulator type attraction with Roger, being the driver of the attraction and these different scenes happening. Again, a very, very cool concept. And then lastly, Benny the Cab ride, right? So this would have been, a lesser attraction, but based on the Benny the Cab character from the film. And again, all three of those. But if you think about it, I mean, look at the IP franchises that Disney has used, recently, right? Star Wars and Pixar, these powerhouse franchises they've based lands upon. That's how strongly the Disney company felt about Roger Rabbit and that character. They were looking for something at that time period. They didn't know what, but when they saw Roger Rabbit, they felt like they really had it.
Right. Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, I think, you kind of mentioned it at the beginning. A lot of people are like, I couldn't envision, Roger Rabbit land attractions like that. But I feel like it's so much because we're comparing it to the IP Disney has today. But to your point, in the 80s, early 90s, Who Framed Roger Rabbit was huge, as you mentioned. And it's like, that was really good IP. And so it's like you could see why Disney would be all in on that, because that was a very popular franchise, and it was like, let's build something out in the same way they do with their IP today. But yeah, now people are like, well, they have Star Wars and Pixar. Why would they ever make anything about this rabbit? So
I mean, it was before all of the Renaissance movies.
Yeah.
It's prior to The Little Mermaid that kicked it off.
Yeah.
So I'm so glad you said that, right? Because again, the bold statement that I make to people when we talk about this subject is, my opinion is that the Disney animation renaissance did not start in '89 with Little Mermaid.
Ooh.
It started in '88 with Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Even though that was a touchstone film, right? Disney's also not Disney, but that is the film that got people to actually care about animated characters again, because it had been a long time before people were interested in that at all. I think Who Framed Roger Rabbit kicked down that door, and then certainly The Little Mermaid and all those great films we got in successive years after that followed the trend.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Yeah, that is a good point.
This is a good one because you're right. It is a whole land, and it's kind of amazing to think about how Hollywood studios would be different, because if they did redo that whole Sunset Boulevard section, because right now, like you said, you have Tower of Terror, which is a good staple, but Rock and Roller Coaster, they kind of have that theater back there that they really don't know what to do with, and it keeps changing, and it's like it still even feels like today that part of the park's not kind of fully utilized. So to kind of think about, if they would have just built this whole land, would it have been a better anchor, and how would it, what would it look like today if they still had that?
Yeah, and that's a good point, because that's another recurring theme of the whole idea of attractions and lands that were dreamed up that never came to be. When we hear these, we always want them, right? Because they just sound incredible. But the flip side of that coin is that there's a butterfly effect, right? If you add that, well, what about the things that we did get that we do love? Right. We'll talk about more of those things later too, but that's the recurring theme. Things like this could have shifted the entire dynamic for what these theme parks could have ended up being if they had been implemented.
Yeah. Now your next one, I think, is a great example of that, because this is something I would have loved, and it would have taken the place of Pandora, and I think I would be okay with that if we would have gotten the next one on your list. So if you want to get into it, it's Dragon Tower. So if you want to explain that, I looked up some concept art. It's absolutely incredible.
Yes. So this, without a doubt, is e-ticket, blockbuster, adrenaline pumping type attraction, right? And it was going to be, again, I'm cheating, right? So I group it in with a larger development. It was to be a part of the proposed Beastly Kingdom section of Animal Kingdom. And Animal Kingdom is really, from a historical perspective, is a fascinating park, really, to research and study. The original plans called for the park to cover 3 different animals, right? Real animals, which were the primary focus that we got with the Africa, Asia, and other sections of the park. Extinct animals that we got with Dinoland USA, and then fantastical fictional creatures in Beastly Kingdom. And I kind of look at this as a fantasy land for the animal realm, right? So unicorns and centaurs and pixies and all these cool things. And what's interesting, if you go through the park today, right? If you just look at the theme park's logo, right? You don't see banshees and Navi, right, in the logo, right? The dragons, right? Again, that was supposed to be a big part of this. And really, my opinion, after the research I've done, Disney does a ton of research, as you would imagine, before they go forward with large projects, especially new parks as a whole. And the feedback that they got from the public, the response based on this proposed Beastly Kingdom area, was overwhelmingly positive. Like, everybody loved the idea. And even looking back at it today, I think if this would have been built, it would have still worked, still be a blockbuster land today. And so this land was divided up into 2 sections, a good realm and an evil realm. And the anchor for the evil realm was this Dragon Tower attraction. So when we talk about this, it would have not only been the starring attraction for the Beastly Kingdom section, but for the Animal Kingdom as a whole, right? It would have been set in this gorgeous, crumbling, castle, right? And a huge dragon within that castle. And even thinking about, as you walk the path to get to the attraction, the queue, right? Which Disney does such a great job, especially today, of immersing guests in the story of the attraction before you get there, right? But you're walking the path, and to the sides you see these scorched shields and broken swords and broken lances. So clearly you're not the first person to have tried to venture into this castle, right? Well, what you find out is there's a massive treasure, hidden within the castle. And it's up to you to go in and try to get that treasure. Some funny comic relief would have been offered by animatronic bats that brokered a deal with you to get you in there to go be a part of this. It would have been something that Disney just did not have at the time and would not for a very long time, and that it would have been a suspended roller coaster, right? So again, track above you, feet dangling below. It would have taken you through different show scenes, right? So I think those are the best. What Disney does great, these e-tickets, it's not just a roller coaster, right? They still immerse you in the story. But, kind of the climax of that attraction is when you encounter this massive dragon animatronic, right? It would have been at the time by far the largest animatronic that Disney had ever done. And what I love, right, is that you would have gotten real fire coming from this dragon as you zoom out in the finale, right? And so it would have been absolutely incredible. I think it would have held up today. Yeah, I don't know if you all are also, Universal fans.
I was just gonna say that. Yep, I'm picturing the one that's on top of the building that spits fire.
Yes, imagine that happening in an attraction, right? Something like that. I mean, it just would have been just a home run success. Now,
yeah, I think it was like a 30-foot dragon, and it was supposed to be like it was asleep, and then like you awoke in it, and then it breathed fire. Like I can only imagine like the movement of this, just to see that, to have an actual like fire effect as you're flying through it.
Yeah, it is kind of interesting because this would be cooler for them to build today because of the just how much articulation they can make those have. Now think of like the shaman of songs. I always forget what her name is, but like how like fluid her motions are. I mean, to see a dragon like that would be absolutely incredible.
I mean, think about that though, right? I mean, this is something that would have changed the entire landscape of that park, right? I mean, and it's something that even today, now we did get, Expedition Everest, a few years later, but imagine having both of those there, right? These two e-ticket attractions, to bring guests in. Again, I think today, if it had been built, Dragon Tower specifically, but really Beastly Kingdom as a whole, I think that works, man. I really do think
Oh
that.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, yeah. I definitely think I think mythical creatures, you know, would have been the way to go. I think they kind of ran into budget issues, and they're like, you got to pick either mythical creatures or dinosaurs. And I think they thought, oh, people are gonna know dinosaurs better. But like, I mean, especially with stuff like this and some of the other attractions they talked about building, the whole Beastly Kingdom, yeah, I think would have been incredible and still great today. Like
Oh,
you
yeah.
would never been
Well,
out there.
now with like how popular, I mean, like they've always been popular, but like dragons, especially
fantasy
right
and
now,
stuff,
are
yeah.
super, super popular. Whenever Harry Potter came out, you had like griffins being really popular and dragons. Like, it is insane, like that they kind of bypassed that. I know what they were thinking is probably like every kid loves dinosaurs, but I think every kid probably loves mythical creatures too.
As crazy as that is, right? One of the big facts, because they knew for a fact that they weren't going to sacrifice the real animal portion of the park, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's going to
Mm-hmm.
be the emphasis. And, I mean, listen, any construction project, right? I mean, it's especially with theme parks, whatever your budget is, just go ahead and double it if you want to
It's
actually
going
do.
over. Yep.
That's right. And it was just such a massive task turning, that Florida landscape into livable areas. And then you've got 24-hour, care that you have to provide for these animals. So it did come to, they had to make the decision, Dino Land or Beastly Kingdom. There was a 2000 animated film called Dinosaur that nobody ever remembers. And it was made with kind of the traditional hand-drawn animation as opposed to computer animation. And that was the tipping point, right? It's like, all right, there is this IP tie-in. Maybe we can make it work. And so they shelved Beastly Kingdom for the moment. But even with Dino Land, I think we'll all recognize they had run out of money, even trying to do Dino Land in terms
Yes.
of
Yes.
and shelved it temporarily. And then just, they thought that Animal Kingdom, when it opened, would bring in so many new visitors. The cash register would be ringing, and they'd be able to do Beastly Kingdom, shortly thereafter. But instead, it cannibalized a lot of the other parks, right? And so attendance went down at Magic Kingdom, Epcot, and the studios. So they were putting money into those parks to try to balance things out. And again, the fun part is around this same time, Islands of Adventure opens, and there is a land in that new park that looks very familiar to part of this Beastly Kingdom concept, the Lost Continent, and they even have a e-ticket roller coaster that is themed to dragons. And so all of these factors kind of combined into preventing it from getting off the board. But I think if Disney came out and they've announced more expansion plans than we have ever heard of, right, in the last 12 months. But if Beastly Kingdom were to ever come on board and get greenlit, again, I think it's one of those concepts that would still hold up today and would still be a home run success for the company.
Kind of going off of that, they've announced a lot, and historically lately, Disney has been really bad at following through on those plans. So, from your perspective as like a Disney historian, what do you think the likelihood is that we actually get everything they've announced?
I would say low. Now,
So what do you think is definitely happening, and what do you think is on the fence?
Well, here's the way I'll answer that, right? So we will definitely get a villains themed land. We will definitely get the Monsters Inc. themed area. We will definitely get certainly the projects that are at work for Animal Kingdom with Encanto and the Indiana Jones retheme of Dinosaur. But, right, do we get those fully fleshed out the way that we all hope it will be? right? And
Right.
so they will get those projects started and those projects will be completed, but at the end of the day, will they have all the cool stuff and all the level of attractions that we hope? That's the question. Now, I do feel strongly. I love studying the dynamic because we are in a theme park arms race right now, right? The
Mm-hmm.
best thing for Disney is what Universal's doing in Central Florida, and the best thing for Universal is
Yep.
what Disney is doing there. And we as theme park fans get to benefit from that. And so I think Disney recognizes with everything that's going on at Universal right now, including this new theme park, they have got to push the envelope and they have got to get new things in there. And so I'm optimistic, cautiously optimistic. But again, the number one rule of construction, right, is double your timeline and triple your budget if you want to actually get done the things that you're actually originally planning. So let's just hold out hope that what we get will be somewhere close to what we hope we get.
Yeah, I think the positive note I think on a lot of stuff they announced is they're using existing ride systems. So Indiana Jones is using Dinosaur. The Cars attraction is kind of the same as what they use at the Cars attraction in California Adventure. Because I feel like where they get in trouble budget wise is when they try to invent a brand new ride system for things, and it's like that takes up so much money that's when then the theming or the animatronics kind of get pulled back. So hopefully they are maybe a little bit smarter about how they spend some of that. So we'll see.
I hope so because again, especially this villains themed land. I mean, that
Yeah,
is something, and we'll cover this in a minute. But that's something that's been rumored for forever,
for so
right?
long. Right.
That's the one that people want so bad. So I feel like there's no singles or doubles. Like you need to hit a home run on that
Yeah.
one especially.
Yeah, they,
Yeah,
they
when
have
they
to
do
do
it,
that.
they have to do it right.
Yeah. I do want to ask you one quick question about Dragon Tower because as you were explaining it, it kind of reminded me of the Journey to the Center of the Earth attraction over at Disney Sea. That's not a suspended coaster, but it's very similar where you're driving through and you kind of awaken this giant bug animatronic that kind of, and then you kind of speed away from that. Is there any connection between those two? Like, is that just coincidence or did kind of that idea maybe morph over to Disney Sea?
That's a great question, and I've actually tried to find an answer to that. Right? And
Okay.
Oh,
I,
nice.
I talked to the Imagineers that I have contacts with, and I've tried to look at every document I can look at. I have not been able to confirm it, but
Okay.
like you, when I look at that, it's hard to convince me that that wasn't at least in the back of that creative team's mind as some
Right.
inspiration for that. Right? Again, I haven't been able to find the evidence, but I'm convinced that it was at least a thinking point, a talking point when they were going through the process of making that attraction a reality.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I would say it just felt very similar as you were describing it, and just
That's
everything
great.
kind of
Great
felt
thought.
felt similar to that. So okay. All right. So let's get to the next one. We've been teasing villains. So let's get to your number 3 here. And again, you have a couple kind of lumped into one here, but one of them is villains related. So
Yes. So again, this is kind of similar to Dragon Tower in that I'm talking about two e-ticket blockbuster attractions, right? Villains Mountain and Fire Mountain, right? And again, really cool story. So my favorite all-time attraction is 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea submarine voyage. When I first visited Magic Kingdom as a kid and rode that attraction, man, it was just incredible, right? And so I'm actually writing a book on extinct Disney attractions now, so I've been deep diving into it.
oh wow.
Oh,
Okay.
cool.
But when that attraction closed, it was a quarter of Fantasyland, just a massive footprint of extremely valuable real estate that sat empty for years, right? They did character meeting areas and things like that, but again, with Michael Eisner, the decision was finally made. We need to do something here, right? This is valuable real estate. So two groups of Imagineers started developing concepts for two different attractions, right? And one was Fire Mountain, right? Basically a volcano. And like 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, it would have had this Jules Verne type inspired design, right? With a very innovative ride system where you would start with, again, traditional track underneath you, and then through the attraction, it would convert into a hanging coaster, right? Where you're zooming through this volcano and just,
Wow.
man, to think about that. Now, the question I kind of asked and got answers to was, wait a minute, that does not sound like Fantasyland, right? That sounds like Adventureland, right? What because this would have dominated the skyline behind Cinderella Castle. Once you got back there, that would have been what every eye was drawn towards. And again, they did think about moving it to Adventureland as well, but they were going to try to tie it to a little known animated film called Atlantis: The Lost Empire, right? And again, another one of those that it's got a really eclectic cast with Michael J. Fox and Jim Varney, of Ernest fame, and Leonard Nimoy. And the film just didn't do what it needed to do. But again, the attraction concept itself, regardless of IP tie-in, would have been incredible. Well, the other team is working on this Villains Mountain concept, right? And so if you're a fan of Fantasia, the Night on Bald Mountain segment from that film, that's the type of mountain they were trying to create, right? This spooky mountain that's really a celebration of all Disney villains, a water flume type attraction, right? Where you would ride through, see different scenes of these different villains, and it would culminate in a Splash Mountain type, fall at the end. Now, think about that. Either one of those attractions, would have completely changed the skyline of Magic Kingdom. We're talking about in addition to the Disney Mountain Range, right? I mean, that's a huge deal. And at one point, I mean, people have different opinions on Michael Eisner. I know the end wasn't great. I love him, right? Because the stuff he did with the parks really just was incredible. Yeah. He considered at one point greenlighting both attractions, right? So Villains Mountain and Fantasyland, and then Fire Mountain and Adventureland. And that just, again, e-ticket mountains, great experiences that would have still held up to this day, right? Well, why did they not happen? The IP tie-in with Fire Mountain, it was just a reality. The film didn't do well. Anytime you're going to build an attraction like that, it costs a ton of money, and you got to feel good about that business risk you're taking by using those funds and doing the attraction. So it got scrapped. Villains Mountain, and this is what ties in with what's going on now, right, with this new villains section of the park. Villains have always been extremely popular with Disney guests, right? I mean, the character meets and the special events and the merchandise flies off the shelves. They love villains. And so even back then, the Disney company was contemplating, well, do we do an entire separate land that's dedicated to villains, or maybe even an entire park that's villains related? And so, the thought was, let's not spin this e-ticket idea here at this point if we're going to do something larger villains-wise later. Now, the later took a whole lot longer than any of us would have hoped. And again, who knows if that will actually be a part of what we do get.
I was gonna say we have to be getting this now, right? Yeah, this has to be part of this. They have the idea already planned out.
All right, but I have the idea right now, though. What if they don't put this in Magic Kingdom? They make a new. This is not going to happen, but they make a new park, which is essentially an anti-Magic Kingdom. And so it's built the exact same way, but it's all villains. It's like a villain's castle. Yeah, that would be so cool. I can see why they didn't.
The name that was batted around, you've got Magic Kingdom, and then you've got Dark Kingdom, right?
Dark Kingdom, yeah.
So it would have been, listen, again, I don't know if we'll ever get a fifth gate. I know there's been some news recently kind of about getting approvals for things in the future. I don't know if we will ever get that. But if we did, man, I've got a long list of never was attractions that I will be emailing to the Imagineers to say, please make these things happen.
That actually would be a good idea, I think, for a fifth park, because it's like, what's the theme of the park? But just take all of the best ideas that never got built and just put them into one park and call it yesteryear or something something like either never was or attract take Muppet Vision, attractions that people loved that they took out of the parks or things they never built and kind of pulled them in. That would be an interesting idea for a fifth park.
Or Escape from Elephant Graveyard, the attraction that I've come up with that the Imagineers have never talked about, but they should totally build.
Well, I mean, what we're talking about, and I think we talked about this, many years ago when we did the last episode is this topic, right? Attractions that were dreamed up that never actually got implemented. It is something that literally every Disney fan I talk to is fascinated by, right? It is
Oh
so
yeah.
fun. It is so fun to think about what could have been. And we all get so excited anytime a new attraction or certainly a new land opens up to look at this treasure trove of things that were dreamed up. Like it is just so fun, right? And that's why everybody's just really captivated by the subject. And it's just, again, armchair engineer, Imagineer, we all are, right? And it's just
Right.
fun to think and dream of.
Well, I think it's a mixture of things. One, they do a lot of modeling and concept art, so there's stuff out there to see. So like there's something tangible, and then two, I think it's like in your mind, it's perfect. Like whenever we build, like we were talking about, like do we get the level that we want on these new attractions? So when they actually build it and you ride it, maybe I'm a little disappointed. I wish I would have done that. But in your mind, it can be perfect.
Or the dragon, like going back to that Dragon Mountain, the dragon just sits and he doesn't move for years and years and years, like the Yeti.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I wasn't going to bring that up, right? But anytime I'm telling the story of this large animatronic and animal kingdom, kind of everybody's first reaction is, well, wait a minute, like, would it have stopped working too?
Yeah.
Right.
Listen, those are real world logistical issues I don't worry about when I'm dreaming about.
Exactly. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all perfect. It's
or
all
even
perfect.
simpler, the guns in Rise of the Resistance. That drives me insane that those guns are turned off or they're not working or whatever. And they fixed them over in Disneyland. I don't know if they're still up and running now, but I know last time we were there, they were not functioning. And it just doesn't make sense for the ride because the vehicle goes forward and then backward. And you're like, why does it do that if you've never actually ridden the ride when the guns were working?
Yeah, that's tough, right? So I wrote a book a couple of years ago, A Magical Half Century, that kind of just a bunch of fun stories celebrating, the 50th anniversary. And I did a deep dive into Star Wars: Rise of the Resistance and all the detail and I really do feel like that there's been certain attractions along the history of the Disney company that really set a new benchmark, right? For attractions, and Rise of the Resistance certainly did that. But I'm like you, right? As someone who's ridden it before, I notice when the Kylo Ren animatronic is hidden and you can't see it, right? And when the cannons aren't firing. And so I get it, right? There are real world logistical things. You got to keep the attraction running. People want to get on it. You need capacity, especially at the studios. But it takes away, like it takes it down a notch, right? When you're missing things like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, well, speaking of the studios and speaking of Muppets, the next one on your list, I think, is one that a lot of fans would love to have, and that is the Great Muppet Movie Ride. I think a lot of fans would just like to have the Great Movie Ride back, but the Great Muppet Movie Ride, I know, is one that's often very much talked about amongst fans.
I have to applaud your transition there, sir. That was really just chef's kiss.
Thank you.
Well done.
Expert,
I know
right?
I just ruined the transition by pointing it out, but I have to say.
So my rankings on this kind of thing vary, right? You ask me again in a month, and I'm going to probably give you a different order, or even different attractions. But
we'll give you a different favorite park day to day.
Oh yeah.
So it's fine.
that's right. But with Muppet Vision 3D closing, the Great Muppet Movie Ride has been on my mind a lot, right? And so again, going back to what we talked about with Roger Rabbit's Hollywood, same time period, right? The park opens, guests flood in, need more attractions. All these concepts are proposed, and one of those, again, along with Roger Rabbit's Hollywood, was Muppet Studios, right? So an entire land dedicated to the Muppets, and it would have included a 3D attraction, which we did get, right, with Muppet Vision 3D. But the centerpiece, and I have to tell you, right, when I start thinking about this, again, would have been perfect then, I think would be perfect now, right? Even with the Great Movie Ride, closing down, you could have still had this, and it would have been great. And so it would have been, just for, I'm sure people know, but the Great Movie Ride, again, the centerpiece attraction for the park, from the day it opened, celebrating the genre of feature films. That is exactly what the great Muppet movie ride would have done, but with Muppet parodies of these different scenes, right? And so if you love the Muppets, that's exactly the type of attraction they need to be in on and would be absolute home run, fun, slapstick type humor. This attraction, it varies, right? Some attractions that were proposed, we get tons of artwork and tons of conceptual information and a great deal of fun stuff to look at. There's not as much with the Great Muppet Movie Ride, but boy, what we did get, oh, just fantastic. So one piece of concept art was one of the scenes would be from the 1931, classic horror film Frankenstein, right? So as you pass through, but think about these characters. Dr. Frankenstein is played by Dr. Bunsen Honeydew, right? Gotta love that. And on the table, as Frankenstein's monster with all this stuff plugged in, is, you better believe it, Beaker, right? And
He's my favorite. Him and the animal are my favorite.
and a perfect role for that, right? And you've got Gonzo there directing the scene, electricity flying again. I mean, that's a home run. And I missed the Great Movie Ride, and I think the Great Movie Ride. There's never been an attraction that was more perfect and symbolic of the park as a whole than that. Maybe Kilimanjaro Safaris for Animal Kingdom, but it was perfect for that park. The complaint in later years was, hey, these scenes need to be updated. We want, some more stuff. But with the Great Muppet Movie Ride concept, you don't need that, right? Because again, it's all fun, right? It's just Muppet parodies of, and that Frankenstein scene was fantastic. But even better than that, the other piece of concept art that we see out there was for the classic 1950s Disney animated film Peter Pan. And the scene is when Peter Pan and the Darling children are flying over London, right? So you've got Kermit as Peter Pan, Miss Piggy as, of all characters, Tinkerbell, right? And so the really fun part is you see offset, right? You've got a rope that's holding Miss Piggy Tinkerbell up as she's flying, and then you've got these Muppets in the background struggling with all their might to try to keep her up and not have her drop, right? I mean,
that's perfect.
That is really,
that's perfect.
Really funny.
Yeah, and so again, I think that would be a home run. I still think it would be a home run. Again, we all missed a great movie ride, or most kind of Disney nostalgics miss it, like I do. I think Muppet Vision 3D, man, I wish it was still there. I think that's actually something that the park needs, right? You've got all these big ticket, long line attractions. To have something where you can get into easily, air conditioned, and still holds up. I challenge anybody to have gone and watched Muppet Vision 3D and not laugh coming out of there. And similar to what they did in that attraction, Statler and Waldorf, there in the Great Muppet Movie Ride, throwing in the fun tracks and humor that I
all the zingers and everything.
Yeah. But unfortunately, the reason it didn't happen, the full-fledged land, is that again, business deal between Jim Henson and the Disney company. Great relationship between those parties, right? Jim Henson really just this master creative genius that was really cut from the same cloth as a lot of the legendary Disney Imagineers that we talk about today. And they were so close to closing a purchase of his company that, again, in one of these annual reports, Michael Eisner actually talked about it as though the deal were already done, right? Where in reality, the actual documents, as a lawyer, I know this, right? The deal's not done until the documents are signed. Well, Jim Henson unexpectedly and tragically passes away. And there's lots of rumors about why that purchase didn't get completed at that time. It happened many years later, but it didn't, right? So instead of getting the rights to all these characters and doing this whole land, they had to license the rights to do specific things. And we did get Muppet Vision 3D, but not the Great Muppet Movie Ride. And, again, even though we've only got a couple pieces of concept art, I'm sure the three of us could sit down and come up with great ideas for films to Muppetize to be included in that attraction.
Yeah, I was even thinking because, I don't know, it's a couple years ago now on Disney Plus, they did Muppets Haunted Mansion. And I'm thinking, why not do overlays of existing attractions? Like Disneyland gets Nightmare Before Christmas Haunted Mansion. Let's just make Muppets Haunted Mansion at Walt Disney World,
Oh,
or
that'd be good.
put Muppets in, any attraction you can think of. Like just put the Muppets in there occasionally as like an overlay. Like I think that would be perfect.
I was thinking like a good movie in the 90s to have done with Muppets, like if they were going to do that, Titanic. like
Hold
like
on.
he's holding they're going on the front of the ship and she falls in or something. like it's Miss Piggy. like it would be so good.
Credit. That is a home run response right there. That would have been perfect.
That was
No-
perfect. We need to get some concept art of that.
Yeah.
Like get some concept art of that scene. So
I can draw it for you. It won't be very good though.
all right, but these are all great. I mean,
Yes.
so far these have all been great, but they are not the number one on your list here. So your number one unbuilt attraction is in Magic Kingdom. It actually goes back all the way to basically the beginning of Magic Kingdom, and this is one that was very grand in terms of scale and kind of what they wanted to do. And we've talked a lot about like how these attractions would have maybe changed the park. Like this would have dramatically changed how Magic Kingdom, kind of the whole history of Magic Kingdom, because it would have basically gone in Frontierland where Big Thunder Mountain, Splash Mountain, like all that stuff we have now, this would have taken up. So if you want to go with your number one unbuilt attraction.
Yes, and so it's the Western River Expedition, and to your point, it would have changed everything, right? Everything about the Magic Kingdom, it would have changed. And I talked about Star Wars: Rise of the Resistance a few minutes ago as being a benchmark style attraction that after it's built, every other attraction gets compared to. The original Pirates of the Caribbean in Disneyland is certainly one of those attractions. Western River Expedition would have been that without a doubt. And it was part of a larger sub area of Frontierland called Thunder Mesa, right? And so any story about these concepts, and again, this is the Babe Ruth, the Muhammad Ali, the heavyweight champ of attractions that never came to be. But any story about this attraction has to start with Mark Davis. And Mark Davis is without a doubt my favorite Disney Imagineer ever, right? I'm just kind of in awe of everything this man was able to accomplish in his career. If you ever need a dose of humility, right? If you ever need to be put in your place because you think you've accomplished a lot, go look at Mark Davis's resume, right? And so he started with the Disney Company in the 1930s and became one of Walt's, 9 old men, one of these core group of animators that helped bring so many of these Disney classics to life. Now, just listen to the characters that Mark was responsible for creating and animating, right? You've got Cinderella. You've got Aurora and Maleficent from Sleeping Beauty. You've got Tinkerbell. You've got Bambi. You've got you've got Briar Rabbit and all the Briar characters from Song of the South. I mean, as an animator alone, Hall of Famer, man, just an incredible artist. Well, then, like a lot of other animators, they find themselves in a strange position when Disneyland is being developed of, hey, we know you're used to drawing things. Why don't you move over and let's start creating attractions, right? I mean, what a crazy transition. And Mark is the person principally responsible behind, my all-time number 1 and 2 attractions. And I don't know which one is one and which is two, but Pirates of the Caribbean and Haunted Mansion, right? So you've got this man who has accomplished all of these things. And my opinion is that his heart and soul attraction and development was Thunder Mesa and Western River Expedition, the thing that never actually got built. But what's cool is, the Disney company today is a theme park juggernaut, right? It's got parks all across the globe. But in the late 1960s, mid to late 1960s, there's one park, right? There's Disneyland, right? And so when you're opening this new Florida project, there's a lot of tough decisions that have to be made, namely, what is this park going to be, right? Is it going to be a cookie cutter of Disneyland? Or is it going to be something new to bring in visitors who have been to Disneyland, right? And the answer was it's going to be a little bit of both, right? There's going to be things that people are familiar with from Disneyland. There's going to be new concepts as well. For whatever reason, well, I know the reason, but Pirates of the Caribbean, the starring attraction of Disneyland, this cultural phenomenon that based on Walt's weekly television show, everybody wanted to be a part of, was not replicated in Florida, right? And instead, here's what's so cool about this proposed concept. You've got a man like Mark Davis, and this is the challenge he puts on himself. I'm going to create the greatest attraction in the history of the Disney company, right? In other words, I'm going to out pirate Pirates of the Caribbean, right? And so that's what this was going to be. So Thunder Mesa, let's talk about Thunder Mesa just for a second, and I'll talk about Western River specifically, but Thunder Mesa was going to be this massive show building, this 4-story building shaped as a Monument Valley landscape that would have stretched the distance between Big Thunder Mountain Railroad and what is today Tiana's Bayou Adventure, right? A massive footprint that have had multiple attractions within it, but the starring attraction was the Western River Expedition. And the easiest way to describe that is an Old West version of Pirates of the Caribbean, right? So this Wild West funny version of the Old West, right? And so Mark, his calling card for all these attractions that he was a part of were gags and humor, right? He was the funny man. He the half of the Haunted Mansion that's funny, that's him, right? Claude Coates gets the the more serious, more sinister parts, and Mark is the comedy version. With Jungle Cruise, right? That attraction was originally supposed to be a real world tour of, hey, here's what these other lands and animals look like. And Mark came in when the popularity was going down and said, we got to make this thing funny, right? We've got to, and he did it, right? He did it. And so that's the goal he sets for himself. And unlike some of these other projects, we have an absolute treasure trove of conceptual artwork, not only by Mark Davis, but also by Mary Blair, who is just another Disney legend and an incredible artist. And you see what this would have been, right? It's a boat ride through this Monument Valley landscape. The attraction is hosted by an audio animatronic owl named Hoot Gibson. And again, from the concept art, you've got singing cowboys and cattle singing back, and bandits who are wearing bandanas, and their horses are also wearing bandanas. And my favorite scene of the entire attraction was they enter a town called Dry Gulch, right? And there's all kinds of crazy, fun things going on, including a scene of a cowboy and his horse on top of a saloon firing guns. Now, I will tell you, one of my most prized possessions, there was a large Mark Davis auction not too long ago, right? Mark has unfortunately passed, and his wife, Alice, who's also a very famous Disney Imagineer, also passed. So there was an auction. His family was auctioning off a lot of their items. And one of the things that I was able to get was one of Mark's original pieces of concept art for the Western River Expedition, and it's that scene with the cowboy and the horse on top of the saloon firing the guns, and it's just, man, I just treasure that so much. But it was again, a huge project that would have included a runaway mine train type attraction also. That is what kind of eventually morphed into Big Thunder Mountain Railroad. But imagine this huge landscape, like this flat top mountain that people could go to the top of, and just the vistas, the pictures you would get of the entire Magic Kingdom from the top of that, right? Just incredible. Couple of things that would have made this attraction even more special. Number one was the number of audio animatronics that were proposed for it, right? So kind of the standard for that was the original Pirates in Disneyland, which had around 100 different. And when I say audio animatronics, right, it doesn't mean the full-fledged Shaman of Songs type animatronics, but still audio animatronic characters at the time. This Western River Expedition would have had around 150 audio animatronic characters, right? Music would have also been a huge part of it, right? So I know I'm naming a lot of Disney legends. If you don't know who those names are, people listening, please go look these folks up because they deserve a podcast in of themselves. But Buddy Baker, right, famous Disney songwriter, had penned the theme song for the attraction, And it was going to be like the Haunted Mansions theme song, Grim Grinning Ghosts, in that it's the same song played throughout the attraction, but in different formats, right? Different tones. And that would have been just so cool. So why did it never come to be, right? Well, the first reason, and unfortunately, this is a sad story, right? Western River Expedition had a long, slow death, right? It was many, many years and a lot of different hurdles that came up that prevented it from coming to be. And Mark, notwithstanding everything he had accomplished, wanted this to happen, wanted this to happen, wanted this to happen, and things just kept getting in his way. The first one is the obvious one we've talked about with other concepts, which is just money, right? So again, they're building this entire theme park and the Polynesian and the Contemporary and just construction. It's the largest construction project in the world up to that time, right? Just this massive construction project. And so they decided to shelve it initially to just get the park open and focus on less expensive attractions that would eat up guest capacity, which is certainly understandable. But it was definitely on the phase 2 plan, right, of getting constructed within a couple of years after the park opened. And we see this because there's all these marketing materials that came out for Walt Disney World and the Magic Kingdom that talked about this, and maps of the park that were put out that show Thunder Mesa on the maps, right? There was no doubt they were going to do this. Well, the park opens, right? And this is one of my favorite stories. So again, this is back in 1971, right? So there's no Netflix, there's no Amazon Prime, there's no Paramount Plus. You get a couple of channels, right?
And there's no internet. I mean, there's
yeah. And one of those channels every week was Uncle Walt, right, showing off his theme park, Disneyland. And again, Pirates of the Caribbean specifically. Everybody wanted to experience that attraction. So people show up to the Magic Kingdom and they start looking for
pirates.
Where are the
pirates at?
Yes. And so I cannot overstate how overwhelming the guest demand was for this attraction. I mean, they were lining up at guest services. They were mad. They wanted this phenomenal experience. So very soon thereafter, Disney greenlit an abbreviated version of Pirates of the Caribbean to be built in the park, right? And so a little salt in the wound, the person who was in charge of that project was Mark Davis, right? And not only was this a shot at Thunder Mesa, right, but it was also a shot because they wouldn't let him replicate his masterpiece from Disneyland. It had to be, because of the park constraints, a shorter version. Now, again, don't get me wrong, I love Pirates, but it was not the exact replica that he wanted.
Yeah, not the same. Yeah. Right.
So that took the first hit. Second hit is just economic conditions in the 70s, right? The OPEC oil embargo, if people remember that. Like, people were traveling less, and then just spending that amount of money just was not a good thing. And then when you got to the point where they were going to start construction activities on Epcot, right? Tons of money went there. You had other items come up, like, and you see this in some of the conceptual drawings, right? The portrayal of Native Americans, right, was not, again, in the 50s when Peter Pan was made, it wasn't a thing back then, right? But, as you're getting into the mid 70s, late 70s, some of those drawings were not great, right? And so that was another little hit. But the biggest, the death nail, right? The death nail to the attraction was, and again, I try to verify as much as I can, but at the end of the day, all you get is rumor, right, on some points, right? And so the rumor is, Disney executives are touring the Imagineering, headquarters, and they run into a young Tony Baxter, again, another great Disney Imagineer, who makes the pitch for, well, wait a minute, if we can't do this entire Thunder Mesa project, what about this Runaway Train project, right? I think that's a really good attraction. That's greenlit, right? So you have a Pirates of the Caribbean attraction already. You have a Runaway Railway type attraction going in, and with that, Thunder Mesa was just not going to happen, and that caused a rift, right? Between Mark Davis and Tony Baxter, and Tony Baxter, who, by the way, phenomenal person, right? The last thing I think he was trying to do was do something to upset Mark, and it was his mentor, right? But that created a rift that unfortunately I think stayed in place until the day that Mark passed away. But again, you've got all this concept art, this massive, massive scale model of the Thunder Mesa project was created. And just again, with that Mark Davis auction that I mentioned, right? As the construction projects we've talked about, I set a budget, and then I basically tripled my budget, and still didn't get everything I wanted. But you had some things from that model, right, that were out there. But it is amazing to think about what butterfly effect Thunder Mesa would have had for the Magic Kingdom. Because again, if you get that development, I wish we would have gotten it because I think it would have been a home run. But do you get the same version of Big Thunder Mountain Railroad that we got? No, you don't. Would it have been better or worse? We don't know. Splash Mountain, right, which is now Tiana's Bayou Adventure. Would you have gotten that? No, that not in that form at least. So there's all these different things that we've gotten that we all love that we might have not gotten with Thunder Mesa. But again, because of the man who was behind it, right? The man who had helped create Haunted Mansion, really the man who created Pirates of the Caribbean, let's be honest. The goal he set for himself, the concept art that we have, the model that we've seen, I think it would have been absolutely incredible, and I really would have gotten it.
Yeah, I mean, just the scale of a 4-story building that this attraction is kind of inside. Like, again, thinking of the 70s, it would have been something that had never been done before. It would have kind of not only changed the course of Magic Kingdom, but I feel like almost changed the course of the theme park industry. Because in the same way that, when Universal built Hogsmeade, it kind of set the new bar for themed lands and things. And, as we talked about, Disney and Universal kind of go back and forth. To have something like that, where it's like, that was like probably be the first immersive land like that. And just to think of how that would have then impacted every decision Disney and Universal made even after that, knowing that's kind of the new bar to start with.
Yeah, no doubt at all, right? And again, it was so close to have happened, right? And again, when you go back and you look at, there's a document called the Preview Edition of Walt Disney World, and there's another one called the Complete Edition of Walt Disney World. That are essentially, marketing type brochures where you see the concept art and they talk about the attraction. They thought this thing was happening, but it's if there wouldn't have been an overwhelming guest demand for Pirates of the Caribbean, does that alone get it done? Maybe, right? Maybe we'll never know. But again, that whole decision to not replicate Pirates in Florida was again a mistake before we even got to that point. But it would have set the bar, I think, for all attractions after that.
I believe too, even whenever they greenlit Big Thunder Mountain, I don't know if it was Mark Davis or somebody. I think he was trying to do a smaller version of still the Western River Expedition. Like to your point, he was trying to get this made at every turn. Like it was, hey, we can't do it. He's like, hey, yeah, let's reconfigure it. Let's make it work. And just trying to get it done no matter what.
He did, right? It was just, again, just think about that, right? I mean, again, this is not a sad podcast, right? Because these are really cool things we're talking about. But again, for Mark, right, for someone to have accomplished that much and to feel so passionately about that project, and that's why in my book that we're talking about these ideas from, one of my favorite things that I did was, all right, Imagineers poured their heart and souls into these projects. So where are the areas in the park where we can find kind of fun tributes and hidden references to those? And you get those, right? If you go in the Big Thunder Mountain Railroad queue today, if you look at those posters and all those cool things that are in there, you will see references to Thunder Mesa, and you'll see references to Western River Expedition. And I appreciate that because that shows that the Imagineers today understand what those projects were, and they understand the men and the women who were kind of pouring so much into making them happen. So even though we don't get kind of the actual attraction, you still get those recognition, those nods that, yep, this was important and this was cool, and we're going to recognize it still in the way that we can.
Yeah, there's some references, I believe, in Disneyland Paris's Phantom Manor. That's kind of like a Western theme. I think that's supposed to be somewhat like the Dry Gulch theme there. I also read on Wikipedia, I don't know if this is 100% verified, but that some of the animatronics that they either designed or built for this are in Living with the Land. I'm guessing some of the animals, maybe some like the buffaloes and stuff. So if that's true, that's pretty cool because I love Living with the Land. So that's a nice little little Easter egg there.
That is correct, and you're right.
Okay.
Buffaloes and prairie dogs, right? So,
all right, there we go.
And again, you know me, right? Anytime we're on Living with the Land, that's what I'm looking for, right? And my kids are like, I go to point it out now, and they're like, Dad, we know, right? We know Thunder Mesa. we got it.
It's just another reason to love Living with the Land now. Like I'll have to ride it some more times and be like, this is Disney history right here.
That's the worst part of Living with the Land, though.
As you can probably tell, I mean, listen, all these attractions I love talking about, but Thunder Mesa and Western River especially, that's really why I wrote the book, right, to begin with. Right? Because I was like, this is a story, because all these attractions are really cool. And as Disney fans, we love kind of thinking about that. But when you dig a little deeper, right, and you look at the stories for how the ideas came about, and more importantly, why they were implemented, man, that tells you the history of the Disney company, right? And how it reacted and responded to different factors and different things. And that is super cool. But yeah, Thunder Mesa, while these rankings may vary and the members may change, Thunder Mesa, Western River has always been, will always be number one, underline 3 exclamation points at the end.
Excellent. Well, you did mention you're working on a book on extinct attractions. So maybe once you have that done, we can come on and talk about ranking of extinct attractions. But if our listeners are interested in any of your books or kind of more of your work, what's the best place for them to go find that?
Yeah, so thank you for that. So all of my books are available on Amazon. You can also visit my website, chrissmithbooks.com. And social media, I'm at X, I guess now instead of Twitter, and it's at @CSmithDisney. Always posting fun details, fun finds. It's an excuse for me to just go out and find more cool stuff and try to put it out there for everybody to see.
All right, perfect. And we will put a link to your website in the description, so if any of our listeners are interested, they can check that out as well. Chris, this has been amazing, really interesting hearing about all these attractions. Really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you all for having me again.
All right, I want to thank Chris again for being on the show. If you're interested in purchasing any of his books, you can check out Amazon or his website. That is chrissmithbooks.com. We will put a link in the description below. But again, really interesting just to think about like all of this stuff and like how much I wish all of this was built.
Yeah.
Because some of this was pretty amazing. But like we talked about with Villains Land, we might be the Villains attraction. They kind of considered maybe that ends up being in Villains Land. We don't know a lot about that right now yet. So
yeah, I think that one's pretty likely to happen. But I am thinking like if they end up building, because there's a mountain with that one, I believe as well. That's going to completely change the skyline of like Magic Kingdom if they add another mountain in there. And then of course, like all of the mountains are calling things need to be remade. And I mean, like the repercussions of adding another mountain would be huge, but also kind of exciting.
Yeah,
right?
it's exciting. It's
the tectonic plates over at Disney World might be shifting.
Yeah, it's a pretty seismic shift that, it'll be interesting to see once that goes up. So that wraps up the show for this week. We'd love to hear from our listeners. What is your favorite unbuilt Disney attraction? If you're watching this on YouTube, let us know in the comments. You can let us know on Instagram. We're at Enchanted Ears Podcast over there. But that wraps up the show for this week. I want to thank everybody again for listening. If you've not done so, please leave us a rating or a review. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. It really helps, and we really appreciate it.
Thanks for lending us your ears.
Have a great week, everybody. We'll see you here next Monday.
Bye-bye.